In the hills of northwestern Turkey, where fog sits in the orchards and the mosque lamps blink like distant stars, a scream rang out through the night. Neighbors rushed into a stone house and found an old woman on the floor, eyes open, whispering one word over and over: mezar, the grave. Her daughters swore she'd seen shadows among the headstones, and when the villagers reached the cemetery, a patch of soil was freshly disturbed. No footprints, just a faint smell of smoke, and buried at the edge of the grave, a bundle of hair tied with black thread, wrapped in paper, covered in dense script. The villagers called the local imam, who recognized the bundle immediately. It was a muska, an amulet with Quranic verses folded and weaponized. And the villagers murmured a phrase no one likes to say aloud: mezar büyüsü, the graveyard spell. Across rural Turkey, there's a kind of quiet magic woven into everyday life. The word for it is büyü, meaning to enchant, to bind, or to command. It's not the broomsticks and potions kind of magic. It's more about whispered prayers, folded paper, and midnight visits to holy places. This could look like a farmer burying a small packet beneath his field to keep his crops from withering, a mother pinning one above her child's bed to protect her from the evil eye, or when words or medicine fail, people visit a hoca, a religious teacher who knows how to shape prayers into power. Most of what we know comes from the mountains of western Anatolia, where there's a small village called Sakli. Anthropologists here recorded how villagers sought help from these hocas who blended Islamic verses with older, pre-Islamic beliefs. And for a small fee, a hoca could write a prayer on paper, fold it into a triangle, breathe upon it, and wrap it in white cloth. That small packet, a muska, could protect a home from a misfortune or ruin a rival's harvest. And to an outsider, it might look like superstition, but to those who live here, it's a quiet agreement between the living and the unseen. And the anthropologist who studied Sakli wrote that villagers didn't see this magic as heresy or rebellion, but just simply how the world worked. Büyü isn't about summoning demons or breaking taboos. It's about rewriting what fate has already written, and it's a way for ordinary people to push back against the forces that control their lives. In Sakli, people say büyü wears three faces. The first is protection, the kind that guards, not harms. For example, when a baby is born, a hoca might whisper prayers into a small packet and sew it into the child's clothing. Or when a storm threatens a harvest, a farmer may hang the verses written on it above his door to keep his fields safe. And this kind of magic, it isn't feared, it's almost routine, a type of spiritual insurance policy against the chaos of life. The second face is persuasion, softer, but no less powerful. When love fades in a marriage, or when a merchant's fortune begins to slip, they may quietly seek a charm to sweeten hearts or draw good luck back. So the hoca might write a verse, fold it into a muska, and tell them to dissolve it in water and have one sip each morning for 7 days. And they don't call it manipulation, they just call it balancing what's gone wrong. And then there's the third phase, the one people don't speak of: destruction. It's the side of büyü born not from hope, but from anger. When someone feels wronged and all earthly justice has failed, they turn to the unseen. And that's when the hoca's work takes on a different tone. Darker verses, stranger symbols, a lock of hair, a drop of blood. And the most well-known of these is the graveyard ritual. Among all the forms of büyü, none is feared more than the graveyard ritual, or what villagers called mezar büyüsü. This magic, it isn't about fortune or love, it's about vengeance. And the story always begins in a similar way. A person who was wronged, humiliated, or betrayed seeks a hoca, but not the gentle kind who blesses newborns, but one who works in silence, one who hangs no signs outside of his door and his name is passed by only in whispers. He asks for something that belongs to the target, a piece of cloth, a strand of hair, sometimes even a few drops of blood. And the ritual must be done alone, and it must be done at night. Under the light of a single candle, the hoja or the client walks to the graveyard and they find a fresh grave, still soft with recent earth, because that's where the boundary between the living and the dead is said to be the weakest. They dig just enough to touch the soil that covers the body. They whisper the victim's name 3 times and tie the hair into a knot. Then the packet, or muska, twisted for harm, is buried beside the grave. And finally, when the candle is blown out, the act is sealed. No one speaks of it, because in the logic of mezar büyüsü, the spirit of the dead becomes the weapon. It follows the victim like a shadow, slowly draining their peace, their health, and eventually their life. Even those who claim not to believe still refuse to walk near such graves. They say the air feels different there, heavier, colder, as if the earth itself is listening. So, who exactly are these mysterious hojas? The word hoja simply means teacher, but in the world of rural Turkey, hoja is the intermediary, the one who knows how to speak both to God and to the unseen. And they see themselves not as sorcerers, but interpreters of the divine, using God's own words to shift what has already been written. In their view, it isn't rebellion, but rather resistance. But others disagree. Local imams sometimes call them haram ishiler, workers of the forbidden. Even within the same community, one hoja may be seen as a healer, while another is feared as a manipulator of jinn. And yet, no one dares to accuse them outright, because if a hoja curses you, even by accident, the entire village will treat you as marked. And some hojas say their knowledge came from years of studying religious texts, while others claim they were chosen through dreams, taught by spirits, or by a teacher who appeared to them at night. And their greatest treasure is a kitab, a secret book often handwritten generations ago, filled with talismans, symbols, and forbidden prayers. And if they ever reveal its contents, they say its power dies. So the hoja remains what it always has been, the bridge between the visible and the invisible. For centuries, the Ottoman Empire balanced on a knife's edge between faith and the forbidden. It was a world where the mosque and the mystical coexisted. Official Islam, grounded in the Qur'an and law, considered sihr, sorcery, as a sin. It taught that fate was written by God and that no one could alter what was destined. But in villages like Sakli, where drought could erase a harvest and illness could destroy a family, people needed more than patience, they needed intervention. And so magic, or büyü, became the religion of necessity. Verses from the Qur'an became weapons and shields, and one scholar, Susan, describes it as an anti-authoritarian practice, a quiet defiance against the idea that fate could not be changed. So if the Qur'an declared that only God knows what is written, then perhaps a skilled hoja could whisper between the lines. And people believe that if Qur'an was the divine word, then every letter carried cosmic power. By rearranging those letters, by combining stars, metals, and numbers, one could uncover or even alter the hidden design of the universe. And as we've discussed, not all magic was evil. Some forms like talismans, astrology, letters magic based on Quranic numerology were even considered legitimate under certain conditions. But beneath that scholarly magic, the darker forms still survived. And even the authorities knew how deep these beliefs ran. As early as the 1920s, when Turkey outlawed the practice of büyü under secular forms, people simply took it underground. And by the early 20th century, büyü had become a problem for a country trying to modernize. When the Turkish Republic was founded in 1923, Mustafa Kemal's new government outlawed religious brotherhoods and spiritual practices that fell outside of Islam's official doctrine. And in 1925, laws were passed that banned all superstitious or magical activity. The old hojas were forced underground. Their books of spells, written in Ottoman Turkish and filled with Quranic incantations, were buried, burned, or hidden inside walls. But büyü didn't vanish. It changed shape. Instead of open rituals, people began to seek out healers in secret. The muska, or folded amulet inscribed with verses, became a quiet replacement for older ceremonies. Love spells, protection charms, and curses were now sold behind closed doors in Istanbul, and they were never called magic, just prayer work. And in the villages, the traditions never truly left. Old women still whispered protective verses into water for sick children, men still carried amulets into the fields, and every so often, a mezar büyüsü was whispered about again. So officially, büyü, it was gone, but in the quiet of rural Turkey, it survived. And not even as defiance, but as inheritance. It's easy to dismiss these stories, to call them folklore, superstition, echoes of a forgotten world, but büyü was never just about spells or curses. It was about the power to rewrite what was written, to challenge destiny itself, and that impulse still lingers. In every culture, every age, humans have looked for a way to control the unseen, to push back against the chaos that rules our lives. And for the people of Turkey, for the Ottoman mystics, for the woman who whispered mezar before she died, magic was never simply belief. It was defiance.